In this video, I just wanted to share some thoughts and some musings that I had about the topic of complaining and how complaining is often perceived, and also how not complaining, someone who is not a complainer, how that is perceived. I just wanted to share some thoughts, perhaps to provoke some analysis and some introspection about how this applies to you or not. And I was just noticing how oftentimes, someone who complains a lot, how that is seen as a very negative trait, and how sometimes maybe, I have heard this before, where someone who maybe never complains, how that characteristic in themselves is upheld. Like, wow, she never complained and she did everything. She took care of everything. She never said a word and she did all this stuff. And how that is sometimes perceived as being something that is like really admirable and really good. But I've seen that there's more than meets the eye to whether you are someone who complains or someone who doesn't complain. And what I have found, let's start with someone who complains, is that if you are someone who complains, what's often underneath that complaining is an absolute feeling of powerlessness, a feeling of powerlessness to change that aspect of your life, that you feel disempowered, you feel helpless, you feel ineffective and inadequate. Maybe there's fear there that you don't feel like you have the strength to face. So with all of those feelings under the surface, what comes out is the expression of your dislike of the situation, whatever it is. And so we look at complaining as a bad thing and that this is something negative about you. On the other hand, let's look at somebody who maybe never complains. And perhaps what they do is they suppress their feelings, they compartmentalize. If you don't know what compartmentalization is, it's basically where you take your feelings and you sort of turn them off, you put them in a box and put it on the shelf in the closet. It's sort of like you have some personal issues going on at home and then you walk into work and you can't be engaged with those feelings anymore because you have to be present for your job. And so you have to compartmentalize and sort of put those feelings away so that you can do your job. It's that kind of a thing. So someone who maybe is really good at compartmentalizing, they're really good at just turning off their feelings, kind of disconnecting and disengaging and switching to something else, something completely different, as if those feelings were never even there. So that person may be also really good at, they suppress their feelings. And they feel like to vocalize their feelings and maybe even complain, to express their dislike, would make them too vulnerable, and that it's not safe to open that up. It's safer to just do it, to just go along with things, to keep the peace, and so they would rather do that. And if we look at, since on my channel I focus on helping people who have been through abuse and healing from abuse and healing from codependency, sometimes among the siblings of a narcissistic parent or a parent who was an alcoholic or had a drug addiction, you'll see that the siblings have polarized ways of dealing with things. They have the same wounds, but opposite ways of handling it. So one will be very out with their feelings, wear their feelings on their sleeve, very vocal about what they like and dislike and what's going on with them, very open, very vulnerable. And the other sibling will be the complete opposite. They will suppress their feelings, they will contain everything within, they'll bury it, they'll push it down, and on the surface they'll look like everything is fine, even though they don't feel that way. So the point that I'm just trying to make is that let's look at, instead of saying, oh, you complain, that's a bad characteristic about you, you need to work on that, or someone who doesn't complain, that's really good, they just take care of everything, they never complain, they're always there, they always show up, they always do whatever needs to be done, that's good. Wherever you fall on the spectrum, or whichever end fits you, instead, what I would say is, let's not judge either one as good or bad, but look at what are your motivations behind complaining. What is your motivation if you do not complain? And let's look at that and see, what does that tell us about who we are and where we need to grow Do we suppress things because we're afraid of being vulnerable? We're afraid of expressing displeasure. We feel unsafe and we're afraid of rejection and abandonment. Or do we complain because we feel powerless to change something? Do we need to address some of our fears? Do we need to look at things in a way that is different than what we have always thought, and maybe realize that we're not powerless, that we do have options, that we can find courage within ourselves, or that we don't have to continue feeling like a victim, that there are other ways of processing our feelings, there are other ways of responding. So again, the trick is to just look at the motivation. Look at what's behind the behavior, and that will give you clues and insight into you and who you are and what you need, maybe needs that aren't being met. Self-care and nurturing that you need, self-love that you need to give to yourself that maybe you aren't giving currently. So that's it. Just some thoughts, just some musings. I hope that this helps you think about yourself and who you are and where you are in your journey. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you in the next video.